Hi everyone, and welcome to the second season of the UX Time podcast. My name is Sviatoslav Nitka, and I am the host of this podcast and a design lead at Magic Flux, which is a part of Tech Magic. Today, our guest is Alp Turgut, the founding product designer at Runna, who has previously worked at Nike, Atlassian, and Salesforce. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast platforms so you never miss an episode. Additionally, TechMagic and Magic Vlogs are organizing the free UX Time Conference 2026, and registration is now open. If you're interested in learning from speakers at some of the largest companies in the world and receiving a certificate of attendance, check out link in the description. Hi Alp, thank you for joining. Could you share a bit about your journey in design? How did you start? What has the journey been like, and where you now?
So, of course. I think it started quite naturally with the curiosity. So, I always interested in how people experience things. I also have always had a talent for visual design as well at the same time, like visual side of things too. Not just how something looks, but how it feels to use and how intuitive it is, whether it creates clarity or friction. That interest slowly became more serious, and over time, I realized product design was the space where all of that came together for me. It had creativity, but also psychology, systems thinking, strategy, and also, much importantly, problem solving. So, since then, my journey has been quite varied. I think it has helped me a lot. I've worked with across startups and larger global companies, and those environments teach you very different things. In some places, you learn speed and resilience. In others, you learn complexity, scale, and how to work across bigger systems. I've been lucky to work across health, sport, enterprise, collaboration, and more premium digital products. So I built quite broad perspective on what good design really means in different contexts. Where I'm now, I will say I see design in much more strategic way than I did at the beginning. So I don't really see it as making screens look nice. I see it as a creating direction, reducing noise, helping teams and make better decisions, and ultimately building products people can trust and genuinely connect with. That's also what led me towards founding product design, because I really enjoy being close to the beginning of something and helping shape not just the product, but thinking behind it. So, starting everything from scratch, designing and building a world that hasn't been done before, it actually really makes things much interesting.
If you compare working in a startup versus an enterprise, what key difference would you highlight, and what should a product designer pay attention to when choosing the type of product to work on?
When I think about startups and enterprise companies, I really see them as completely different design environments, definitely. And each one teaches you something valuable. So, in a startup, like I said before, everything moves much faster. There's usually less structure, less certainty, and a lot more ambiguity. So, like, if you want to be a founding product designer of a startup, you really need an experience in order to do that. As a designer, like you're often much closer to the core of the business. You are not designing flows or screens. You're helping to shape the product itself. Sometimes even the company direction, because like especially in startups, if you are a founding product designer, you are actually working closely with the CEO very, very at the beginning because the team is being shaped. Depending on the startups, of course, position in the industry, it might even start just working closely with the CEO. Of course, in time, when the startup's getting a bit more bigger, you might have a product manager to work with. But depending on that, your decisions can have a very immediate impact. But at the same time, it can also be messier. There are fewer resources, fewer established systems, and usually a lot more pressure to move quickly and prove value. So it is something that you should really be up for. But in the enterprise section, it's almost the opposite generally. Of course, there are some closer like the messy ones, but when the scale is bigger, the systems are more mature. and there are usually more stakeholders involved. So the complexity is often not built from zero, but in navigating what already exists. You might be working across legacy systems, multiple teams, technical constraints, governance, compliances, brand rules, and internal politics. Like it's all about company strategy. So in the enterprise, the challenge is often less about speed and more about alignment. You need patience, communication, and strong ability to work within complexity without losing clarity. So I think one of the biggest differences is that in startups, your strength often comes from range. In enterprise, your strength often comes from depth. Maybe we can actually phrase this as in a startup, you may need to do a bit of everything, but in enterprise, you may need to go very deep into system operations and collaboration. And things are getting same when startups get started to getting bigger as well, especially for a successful startup environment. There are like three different phases when you are going in, and the last one will be is going to be very closer to the enterprise anyway. In terms for advice for designers, I will say first that know what kind of environment suits you personally and your strengths, of course. If you love ambiguity, ownership, speed, building something from scratch, startups can be incredibly energizing. If you enjoy structure, though, like scale, complexity, influencing across larger organizations, and if you are actually want to build a nice portfolio as well. Second, they shouldn't be assume one is better than the other. I think that's the mistake of a lot of designers make. Startups experience can make you sharp, fast, highly adaptable, but enterprise experience can make you incredibly strong in systems thinking, communication, and large scale design maturity. The best designers are now usually learn from both worlds. And also, like I said, they come from enterprise experience and then they went into a startup one because they, with the experience they have, it really helps them to move faster. Third, they need to adapt their mindset. Like a lot of designers fail not because they are not talented, but because they use the wrong operating model for the environment they are in. Startup designers need to avoid over designing and waiting for perfect conditions. Enterprise designers need to avoid thinking speed alone with to solve everything. So each environment requires a different kind of design maturity. So I will overall say that like I'll startup teach you how to create momentum, enterprise teach you how to create stability. And if you can learn both, you become much stronger than you can imagine.
You are a founding product designer, so it would be interesting to hear what that role means to you.
So yeah, I think founder product designer can mean different things in different companies, but for me, it's never just meant being the first designer hired. It means being there at a stage where the foundations are still being formed and having real influence over what the product becomes. Since you are not only designing the interfaces, um, you are helping to define how the product should work, what kind of experience it should create, what standards the team should have, what the design language is, what the quality looks like, and often even how the company starts thinking about product more broadly. In early stage teams, design is much more connected to survival because every decision has much a bigger weight. What I really like about the role is that the range it requires, like you need to be strategic, but also very practical. You need taste, but also speed. You need to be able to think about the big picture, but then go and solve very small and very real product problems. And you also need to communicate constantly because in those environments, clarity is everything. So for me, being a product designer is really about creating direction in uncertainty. You're helping turn something early and ambiguous into something coherent, useful, and strong enough for people to believe in.
Looking back, what are the top three mistakes you'd warn first time founding designers to avoid?
So yeah, there are definitely a few, but I think the first big one is rushing in the execution before the problem is actually clear. This is all very at the beginning in the core UX foundation levels anyway. In startups especially, there's this constant pressure to move fast that can push designers straight into the UI or flows before the team has properly defined what the problem they are solving. But if the foundation is wrong, speed doesn't really help. You just get the wrong answer faster. The second mistake is of probably is confusing the output with the value. I think a lot of first-time founder designers feels like they need to constantly produce work to prove themselves. More screens, more flows, more deliverables. But actually, some of the most valuable work a designer does is rethinking, reframing, simplifying, and prioritizing. The thing is, like, sometimes your biggest contribution is stopping the wrong thing from being built. And the third one is probably underestimating the communication. It's really that's the key. I think this is a massive one. In early stage business, if you can't explain your thinking clearly, if you can't connect design decisions to product, growth, trust, or business impact, then people won't fully understand your value. Being a strong designer is not enough on its own. You also need to make your thinking legible to the people around you. So, yeah, if I had to simplify it, uh, you shouldn't jump onto solutions too early. The second, we can actually summarize it as like don't mistake volume for impact. And the third one will be like don't overlook the importance of communication.
When we are talking about health tech domain, specifically sport apps, what is the main design differentiator for you compared to other domains?
Yeah, this is actually a really nice question. For me, the biggest difference is that the sports and health products are much more bound up with the human behavior. So you are not just designing for convenience or productivity, you are designing around motivation, routine, emotion, self belief, and consistency. That changes everything. In other domains, a user might tolerate a clunky experience if they really need the outcome. But in sports applications, the friction can kill the momentum very quickly. If the product feels confusing, overwhelming, too demanding, or just emotionally flat, people can disengage not only from the application itself, but from the behavior too. And that's a very different kind of responsibility. So, what makes it especially interesting is that people bring a lot of themselves into these products, their goals, their insecurities, their habits, their energy levels, injuries, confidence. So, the design has to go beyond function. It needs to be supportive, it needs to build trust. Yeah, it needs to make progress feel visible and setbacks feel manageable. So for me, the real differentiator is that sport and health applications design sits between performance and psychology. The best products in that space understand both. And one thing to add is that also is that like when you actually use this expertise to help people's health, actually it feels like more noble as well from uh, from industry side of things as well. They can just like help people to like spend their time or like buy some stuff, but you are trying to help their become a better person in their health perspective and create a new habit.
And from your perspective, what is the main challenge you see in designing sport apps?
So yeah, I will say that the biggest challenge is that keeping the product motivating over time without making it feel heavy. It's actually quite easy to make something feel exciting at the start. Most people begin with the energy and good intentions. The real challenge is that what happens afterwards. So when life starts to get in the way, like people get tired, busy, stressed, injured, or even like they lose confidence. Like it doesn't work as it is. So that's where the design really gets tested. So I think a lot of challenges around design different states, not just different users because we actually create the app generally for different user personas. But the same person can need a very different things depending on the day they are having. Sometimes they want structure and intensity. The other times they need reassurance, flexibility, or something that feels easier to re-enter. And then there's this balance between guidance and simplicity. If you don't give enough, the product feels shallow. If you give too much, it becomes mentally exhausting. I think the best sports app feels powerful but calm. They give people what they need without making the experience feel like work in itself. Making it adjustable, continuously learning makes especially the sports app the biggest differentiator in their competitor.
Nowadays, AI is everywhere, so it would be interesting to know how and which AI tools you use for product design needs.
So yeah, the AI is everywhere now. So I use AI a lot, definitely, but very intentionally. I don't really use it as a replacement for design thinking. I use it more as a thinking partner or acceleration layer. So a lot of value for me is in exploration and synthesis. So I might use AI to help structure research, summarize patterns, cluster ideas, test different ways of framing a problem, or explore possible directions early on. It's also very useful for communication, whether that's refining the UX writing or sharpening the product narratives or helping turn quite messy thinking into something clear for stakeholders. I also use it in early stages of the product to move faster as well. Things like mapping journeys, thinking through edge cases, generating first draft frameworks, or pressure testing assumptions. Like it's very good at helping you widen the field before you narrow it. But I think the important bit is that AI still doesn't replace judgment. It doesn't replace taste, context, prioritization, or product instinct. Even though it is like you can actually give a direction to learn the way it goes, it's often see that the way it goes with the AI, it actually loses its focus and it's actually give an outcome for you that you haven't done any work before. So I see it as a tool that can make strong designer faster and sharper, but it doesn't actually remove the need for experience or critical thinking. So it's up to you generally.
You have worked as a product designer at many well known companies, such as Nike, Atlassian, Salesforce, Rolls Royce, and Mercedes Benz. So it would be interesting to hear your perspective on the future of the product designer role.
So yeah, I think the role is becoming much more strategic. I really believe that as tools get better, and especially as AI makes output easier and faster, the value of product design shifts more towards judgment, systems thinking, and direction. I think the future design is less someone who is only there to produce deliverables and more someone who helps make sense of complexity. That means understanding the users, of course, but also understanding the business priorities, technical constraints, product strategy, brand, trust, and how all of things connect. I think designers are going to expect it to operate much more cross functionally and much more confidently in ambiguity. I also think that the bar is going up. It won't really be enough to be just to be visually strong or just be a good at user interface. The strongest designers will be the ones who can frame problems well, influence decisions, work closely with the product and engineering, bring clarity to the uncertain situations, and create a seamless premium experience between product, engineering, and marketing. Another thing I will become even more important is trust. The products are becoming more intelligent, more automated, more personalized, and that means users will care much more about transparency, control, and whether something feels respectful and human. The values. It's very important. So the designers are going to have a big role in shaping that. So overall, I think the product design is becoming broader, more strategic, and more influential. The tools will evolve definitely, but the essence of the role will stay same, and will make things make sense for people. And overall, I think as its best, design is really about creating clarity for the users, for the team, and for the future of the product.
And the last question, what advice would you give to a product designers on how to collaborate effectively within a product team?
So I think the first step is learning to communicate their ideas much clearly. So a lot of designers are good at showing outcomes because it speaks for itself. Like you can say that like this is it, and you can actually tell what has been done so far very easily, but not always as strong as explaining why they made the certain decisions. That's what actually also people need in the industry, like when they actually want case studies. So in real product teams, like people need to understand the reasoning, the trade-offs, and the impact. So instead of like only presenting a polished screens, designers should get used to talking through the problem, the thinking, and what they are trying to solve, like the journey itself, probably. And also they should need to definitely set to expectations, probably, especially when you're working for the startup. You need to definitely you need to involve people earlier. So one of the most common mistakes is that disappearing into design and then coming back too late with finished solution. That usually creates friction. Like collaboration improves a lot when designers bring product managers, engineers, researchers, and stakeholders into process earlier, and it makes people feel included. It feels like people are valued, which is very important, especially in the people communication. And this usually leads to better outcome as well at the end. Like people, because they're involved in that design process and thinking, the outcome will be like they're not criticized that much because they something that collaborative. Another important part is like learn how to listen properly. Good collaboration is just not about presenting confidently. It is also about like understanding how other people think. Engineers may be focused on feasibility. Product managers are like on priorities. Founders on business pressure, and marketing on positioning. Strong designers learn how to hear those perspectives without becoming defensive. This is what makes the collaboration mature. I also think design is improved by understanding the language of other disciplines as well. Like you don't need to become an engineer or product manager. My background is coming from, for instance, like coding. So it really helps me to learn, to communicate better with the engineering team to understand like what can be delivered or not, what can be achievable in a very short amount of time or like longer term. So you should understand enough to have a better conversations. If you understand technical constraints, business goals, career timelines, user metrics, people trust you more. They see that you are thinking beyond visuals. Another big one probably is that being easier to work with, like being an easygoing. That sounds like simple, but it matters a lot. Like giving context, following up clearly, documenting decisions, and not making collaboration feel heavy all make a huge difference. Like in the industry, people remember talented designers, but especially remember designers who can make teamwork smoother. Also, feedback on collaboration, definitely, not just on the design quality. Was my process clear? Like getting all the time feedback from the people that you are working with. Was the handoff understandable? How we can actually improve the communication? What we can add more into this collaboration so it can become something more stronger, intentional, makes things much better. And then the final is that managing the expectations of the people you are working with. So understanding how long does it take, like when it can be delivered, to make sure that a seamless communication has been made and there won't be any time constraints at the end. Also miscommunication that people can like expect things that you can make or not in a very short amount of time, even though like it might not, whatever they're expected from you might not be realistic. You need to clearly communicate that it's not feasible to ask this outcome in a very short amount of time and make the expectations in a way that it actually helps for both people at the end.
Help. Thank you so much for this great conversation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was my pleasure.